Hi there, my name is Chris Gazdick, and this is Through a Therapist's Eyes. I still have that book out, Re-Understanding or Rediscovering Emotions. I did it again, Neil. How did I do that?
I don't know. You think you know the title to your own book.
I mean, Morgan James can be so mad at me, but it's called Rediscovering Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self.
Actually, it's called Re-Understanding. You are right. Re-Understanding.
Oh, I was right. Okay. Jeez, wow. Can we just start over, maybe? I don't know. We're not going to cut that out. Yeah,
you wouldn't let me cut out my eye thing.
That's right. That's right. This is where you get personal insights from a therapist directly in your own home or personal time in your car. So we do invite you to see the world through the lens of a mental health and substance abuse therapist. You can help the show by subscribing. Hit that little subscribe button. If you're on Apple Podcasts, you hit that little 5-star review. Give us a little bit of a written review. That helps us out a lot. We're really trying to push for more of those. Also, contact at throughatherapist's.com is the way to reach us. But, Neil, we had a thing this last week where we had somebody that wanted us to respond, and what did they not do? Teach them, sir. How do they do this?
They filled out the contact form, but they did not give us their email address. So if you fill out the contact form through the website, make sure you put your email address in so we can come back to you. So that's we need to have something to reach you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I felt bad. I felt terrible. I was like, Neil, can we not go and root this out some way? He's like, no, they didn't give us anything. So please, that helps us out a lot to respond to you. And we really want to do that. This is the human emotional experience, and we endeavored to figure this thing out together. Neil, you did that explanation so well. I'm really impressed with your explaining ability.
Well, I try. I have to explain to my kids a lot, so it works out well. A lot of experience.
Right.
Oh, I felt that.
You felt that?
Oh, yeah.
You look beautiful today, as a matter of fact.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes. I tell you, and your voice sounds awesome on the microphone.
Thank you.
Neil, do you have a compliment for Kasie?
I love the green shirt and the new headband style you're going with.
Wow.
You really do have a very nice haircut. I've been commenting all week.
Thank you.
Yes.
It was an accident, but a happy accident.
I'm starving for a compliment, somebody.
Yeah, you look well.
Oh, God. The show's name is Toxic Positivity.
Yeah, it is. And so we are going to jump into a world.
See how we did that?
Yeah.
Did you see that? That was all right?
Jump into a world of toxic positivity. So as you guys know, if you've been with us, I'm kind of co-hosting the show.
She's making fun of me again, y'all.
Just a little. I have to poke at least once a show.
You got complimented for your pokes. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, thank you.
You did. You got complimented for your pokes. That's cool.
It's a part of who I am. If I didn't have that, I would need interpretive dance.
Sure.
So, but yeah, so we're going to do a show today about toxic positivity. And I kind of subtitled it like, is good vibes only the best mindset for every situation? And so I want to jump into this concept and see kind of what you think. So Chris, like when I say toxic positivity, what is your kind of rudimentary understanding? Or maybe you don't really know what it is, but how would you define toxic positivity if you were breaking it down?
That is interesting. And I'm going to tell you, audience, this is kind of fun for me. Like we do have the co-host. Did I do okay there?
That was great.
Okay. We have the co-host process where people are, joining us for a month at a time. And so Kasie's been doing this, but she's been doing a little bit more because she works at Metrolina with us. And I've kind of invited her to do the prep here. So I am absolutely, matter of fact, Kasie, I didn't even read it hardly. You saw me skim it when I skimmed it. That's all I did. So this is going to be fun for me. So I'm going to enjoy just kind of along for the journey that you have created, ma'am. So toxic positivity, I don't know. First of all, to me, honestly, like the word toxic gets way overspoken, I feel like. It's a word. As a matter of fact, what was I watching? Oh, I'm just going to say, it's funny. This is just fresh off my brain. All I'm going to say is a national convention. That's all I want to say. Because I don't want to get hate mail. I don't want to get political.
Fair enough.
But it was just like, oh my God, this group of people at this national meeting fairly recently were getting together. And it was just kind of amazing to hear them talking about all of the different buzzwords, the psychobabble that has made it into our culture, and the way that the panelists and the crowd and everybody was back and forth with this was just like, okay, cool concepts, good idea, quiet time and sensory defensiveness and their needs and what they're looking for. And I mean, but the back and forth was like totally misapplied psychobabble.
Yeah.
Totally misapplied psychobabble. And I was just losing it in my mind watching this. It was kind of hysterical, but it bothered me. And this is why it bothered me, right? Same thing with the question that you asked me. So the word toxic is a very important word, but I feel like it gets way overcooked, way overused. And so when you think of a concept of toxic positivity, I want to be careful about this topic as we go through it, because I think it can be grossly misused and misunderstood in the way that people use psychobabble words.
Yeah, so completely agreed, right? Because what we don't want is for people to think that there isn't power in positive thinking.
Right.
Because there is some great power in positive thinking. If you've heard anything on the show, you've heard me talk a lot about resiliency, and a lot of that comes from reframing, rethinking, and reworking connections to be able to create growth experiences out of trauma or out of really narrow places in your life, right? So I do want to be careful as well, but I got turned on to this term because of different things that I've researched along my wellness journey. Last show that I did, we talked a little bit about the illness model, and we talked a little bit about the wellness model when we were talking through some of those things. And so going back to kind of my wellness roots, I came across this concept, and it is kind of a buzzword.
Before you go much further, let me play off what you just said, and I'll try to answer the question too, because I don't even think I answered it.
Yeah, you haven't yet, but that's okay.
Right.
We'll get there eventually.
Because really, I even quoted in my book, the Norman Vincent Peale's book when I was a kid was one of the most powerful experiences I had as a young adult, really a teenager at the time, talking about the power of positive thinking. Like, this positivity stuff is really, like, it will change your neurology. It's that powerful. Cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most studied forms of therapy that we have, focuses on, you just mentioned, redirecting thoughts and what do you call it? I just brain farted on it. Rewording something. What do you say? Reframing. Thank you. Jeez, my brain is just tired today. But I mean, that's a central theme, and so I want to play off that. I don't want to lose that. Positivity is very, very good. We need a lot more of it. But toxic positivity, to me, is sort of undercutting. It's sort of fake, right? It's like when I'm love bombing you. People talk about that with domestic violence, right? That's toxicity. That's really kind of putting positivity off in a very, here's another word, sarcastic way, in a negative, undercutting way that gets disguised. We started off the show a little silly with
right.
Oh, you look so beautiful. Oh, you're so nice. Oh, Neil, you're so great. No one did give me a compliment yet. You started, but that's okay. Yeah. I look horrible today?
No, I said you're looking well today.
Oh, I heard you. Great pause.
No, and I want to point out, I know that you don't know Chris's eating habits, but I am so impressed that he was able to decline temptation of French fries today and ate the mess out of some Brussels sprouts. So I'm kudos to you.
I do try.
That is a lot of willpower.
That is. I've actually been trying a little bit more this year.
You look great.
I need to get better. I'm on cameras across the world
there you
now.
Go.
So
across the
that's
whole world.
Good motivation. So shoot it off, man. What did you come across this, ma'am?
Yeah, so the first interaction that I had with toxic positivity came from when I was in graduate school. We were in the development class, take development across the lifespan, counseling across the lifespan, I think is what the class was called. And we talked a lot about development. And part of what we started on was positive stereotyping. And it kind of touched on some subjects like in the newspaper when they report things like a person that has a hearing impairment completed a marathon and they praise them for completing the marathon. And the person's like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with my legs. I have a hearing impairment. But we start positively stereotyping people sometimes because we feel like they have a disadvantage or they have something wrong with them. And so we drum up all the things that they do and it becomes positive stereotyping. And so then from there, this subset kind of came to my attention of toxic positivity. And I thought, wow, so if there's positive stereotyping out there about maybe different disorders or different things going on in people's lives, I wonder what else is out there that kind of border on this like positive stereotyping kind of concept. And so I came across toxic positivity, and it kind of interceded with the culture of social media, Pinterest culture, things like that, and the reposting of all the positive quotes and all the filters we do, pun intended, to put out our best selves, on the internet.
Neil and I were just crashing a little bit on Instagram. It's fake again. There's a lot of fakeness.
I mean, real talk, I could probably win an Instagrammy, honestly, with some of my things that I post on of my perfect children on Instagram, right? But I also try to have some realness to my life as well. And so the kind of the basis of the definition of toxic positivity is the belief that no matter how dire or difficult a situation is, people should maintain a positive mindset, kind of like this lifestyle of good vibes only. But the reason or the way that it becomes toxic is not always known. It can be very subtle. So I do want to point that out, that sometimes that mindset can become toxic and becomes, overwhelmingly difficult to manage. But sometimes we give people just an overgeneralized, extreme vision of what positivity has to be. So
let me ask you a question right off the get-go as we get on to this, because, I'm just listening to you, and I'm not as familiar with the topic toxic positivity. And, I get into checking out business, and I'm a business entrepreneurial mind and a thought leader, so to speak, and these types of things. And when you get into that realm, you hear a lot of people, embrace the suck, break what works, make it better. You get into a state where you have to accept and live in the discomfort that gets created. I mean, working out is constantly uncomfortable. And so I'm wondering how the rub there goes back and forth with all of this positivity that people kind of create versus, wait a minute, you have to really have your, you got to be punched in the gut sometimes too. You fall a lot in life. You have so many struggles. So I'm just curious how that rubs back and forth, or will we cover that?
Yeah, we are going to cover a lot of that. And so I think that we will get there. But something that you say all the time on the show that goes along with your book is understanding the human emotional experience.
Right.
Right? And I think that's where this comes into play, is that our emotions don't stop at happy.
No.
Happiness sometimes is an elusive trap, right? So when I often ask people, about happiness, sometimes their concept is kind of bloated that it's like being up all the time. Well, that's not real happiness. That's mania, right? Like if we're just up all the time, it's a
clinical term.
Yeah. And so it's like we're just on cloud nine all the time, and we have a full range of emotions. And I would arguably say, and I think that you would too, that the human experience is being able to interface with all of those emotions and take life in stride, and that's where happiness lives, right?
Case in point.
Yeah.
I like to be genuine. I'll call myself out. What did you call me earlier this morning? Do you recall when we were working? I was an elf.
An angry elf.
Right.
Like, ooh, you're an angry elf today.
I don't know why. I'm just sort of energy was low and stuff was, I don't even know what I was saying. And so I'm going to be positive. I'm up for the show and I'm kind of doing this, but I'm having a little low energy day. Slept well the last 3 nights too. I don't know why. But, when we're oftentimes in therapy, right, you have to facilitate yourself in spite of not having the best energy day or in a positive frame of mind. But that's okay. Like, that's real. And so, yeah, I'm telling the world, today I'm a little bit low energy, and I was an angry elf earlier, evidently.
Yeah, all in good fun.
Yeah, we were having fun.
We banter back and forth.
I think the audience has picked up on that. It's all in good fun, and I don't take any offense of it. But what I'm pointing out is, you're seeing me actively doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and there is such a stigma around, I don't know if you've ever heard like positive Patties and negative Nancy's, right?
Oh, yeah.
But where it's
Yeah, we
like,
got
oh, you're
names
such a
for 'em, like-
negative Nancy, you
Right.
know, or such a positive Patty, you know, and and there's just like a lot of stigma around that. Either you're too much in the morning, or you're not enough in the afternoon. And so part of this conversation is going to be how those things kind of rub together, like you were talking about, but also how do we kind of recognize when we do it ourselves, when it's happening around us, and what can we do? So we're going to offer some real solutions today too, as we continue the conversation. So just briefly, some forms of toxic positivity, right? So must be things that you might have heard before, so on and so forth. So I'll give an example. Like, let's say someone loses a job, right? And so people often offer encouragement like, just stay positive, or look on the bright side.
It's a phrase. I love phrases.
Right. Just stay positive or look on the bright side. And
There's always a silver lining.
right. Yeah. You know, things like that. And so while the intent of the person saying that is to be encouraging, right?
Right.
Or you might be like myself sometimes, and I know this is hard to believe, but sometimes when people tell me things, I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well,
It is hard to believe.
Like, just hang in there, you know, like keep your head up, you know, and things like that. And there's no realness to that empathy in that statement. And so the person may come away from the conversation feeling kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll just stay positive. I just lost all the income for my family.
You know, quick story.
Yeah, go ahead.
A friend of mine, well, a neighbor, went through the death of her mom. Okay, it was a very hard time. And I guess she was close to her mom. I don't know her well, but I kind of want to give a shout out and a compliment to my wife because, you know, this lady is interacting with a lot of people and they're doing this, you know, oh, sorry for your loss. This is so beautiful, death, whatever, you know, and all. And, you know, my wife just looked at her and she's like, you know, I'm sorry. I have no idea what you must be going through. And I know this must be a tough time. And I just, you know, I'm here to be with you or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was perfect because what she did in that moment is she allowed her to be sad.
Yeah.
You know, she allowed her to be with whatever emotion. And, you know, when you're grieving, the emotions are all over the place. So, you know, it's nice to be encouraging. That we don't want to lose that again as we started off.
Right.
But it's okay to just be sad with somebody.
And to give the space for that. And I think that's the thing is that some of this just needs a space. And that kind of moves into my next point when people say things like, everything happens for a reason.
Hate that phrase.
Right.
Yeah, I hate that phrase.
And I mean, it's kind of a half truth, right? And so when we do that, what it does sometimes is it doesn't leave the space for the person to kind of experience what they are actually experiencing, or at least inform you what they're actually experiencing, because they feel like if they say anything in that moment that's outside of something positive, it's either going to come out really ugly, like, what do you mean everything happens for a reason?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's going to come out and you're going to think some type of way about me. Like, you're going to start judging what I'm saying because I'm not feeling positive in this space.
Right.
And so that's where the toxicity of that conversation comes in.
Gotcha.
It's where the person that is experiencing the loss, the person that's experiencing the loss of job, the grief, whatever the case may be, isn't, quote unquote, allowed to experience the breadth and the gravity of their emotion with the person that's telling these things.
Yeah.
And another one of my favorites is, you know, happiness is a choice. You should choose to be happy.
Oh, that's
you know,
funny.
And
yeah.
when we're going through disappointing times or hard relationships, things like that, and that feeling a negative emotion is basically your own fault.
Right.
That if you're not choosing happy, you're obviously choosing sad. You know, I can't tell you the number of people that I've sat in my office, and maybe your office too, and are experiencing symptoms of depression or trauma or whatever the case may be. And how many family members have said, like, you just got to get over it. You need to make a choice to be happy. And they're like, if I could, I would. Do you think I would choose this?
It burns me a little bit. And it's funny because let me draw a little bit of a distinction. You know, I've been going through my book and I've got a whole section that I want to give a class or a training on that is focus points. You know, it also drives me a little bit nuts when I hear people, you know, well, you just feel the way you feel and it is what it is. You can't do anything about it. Like, our whole career is designed about how to help people with that. But the choice that people have, as you're saying, you can choose your focus point. You can choose, some of the things that you do, but you can't choose other things. And so it's a false choice. We want to manage our emotions when we're down. And, the whole book is about that. The whole career that we have is kind of about that. But it's also okay to be down for a little while.
Yeah.
Part of the power of a therapy relationship is just sitting with somebody, being present and available to them when they're in a tough life circumstances for weeks.
Yeah.
Or even months at a time. Now you can get stuck in that. So the focus points and what you're doing is important, but it's important to, as you're saying, allow someone to be where they're at. Like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Even if they are in depression or a manic state of bipolar or something, like we can't just flip our fingers and switch that for them.
Right.
And they need that space with us.
Absolutely. And so as we continue this discussion, I'm hoping that we can give that framework to kind of what we're talking through and kind of how to help ourselves to become educated about what we say. Because again, I don't think it's ever anyone's intent to be, overgeneralizing this stuff or not being supportive. But I think it can come across that way and it can feel disingenuous. And so we want to help all of the listeners out there and ourselves, because I know for myself, I've definitely done some of this before.
Oh, yeah.
In my life, in my career.
Absolutely. When you're not thinking.
Yeah, when you're not thinking, like,
acting.
like
Hanging out.
Hey, chin up. It'll get better. It'll get better.
I actually love the phrase chin up.
Chin up.
Love the phrase chin up.
I'm always like, I have to add on extra. Like, so I'm like, chin up, buttercup. Things like that. So how is this harmful? Because, you touched on something earlier and I want to go back to it. So is it really bad to kind of be positive most of the time?
I don't think so. Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Can you share some sentences about that?
Why it's not bad to be positive most of the time? Well, as a younger man, I was actually accused of being, positive and whatnot, too much so. And I think that border on naive. Mm-hmm. So there's a balance, as with most things, but the power of positive thinking, those are very real realities, and so if you can do that most of the time, that's great. I think that's got to be genuine, though.
Yeah,
and that's the big difference. People are putting on a happy face when they're really in the mess of their life. That's not being genuine. And so when I think I would say, you want to be positive, as much as possible while being genuine to the struggles that you have. How's that for a catchphrase?
Yeah, I love that. And as we continue, we'll talk to a lot of the points too about, feeling the emotion without having to become it, right? So experiencing and feeling without having to succumb.
That is so hard.
It's so hard, right?
That is. Can we park there for just a second?
Yeah, let's do that.
Experiencing the emotion without becoming what the emotion is, that if you can master that in your life, that is a development, that is an emotional development that will take you very, very far, because that has integrity, that's trustworthy, that's genuine, that has a certain amount of flexibility in it, because you can move with what's really there without being stuck in it, without allowing whatever's going on that's triggering this to own you. That's where people get overrun and again, just stuck spots. We did a show on stuck spots.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, even clinically, I think, when we went through training and we talked about Carl Rogers and unconditional positive regard for people.
Oh, okay. Well, that's,
right?
Wow. Look at her face,
Things
y'all.
like that. Well, and it's not that I don't agree with that, but sometimes that's difficult to have unconditional positive regard for people.
Yeah.
Disagree or no?
Agree.
Yeah.
It's not genuine.
Yeah, it's not. But I think that there can be a lot of strength, though, in being able to help people arrive at that place. And it doesn't take being a clinician to do that. I think, like you said, what your wife did is being genuine and giving people that space. And so what I want to kind of jump into is that when we enter into a space where toxic positivity starts to happen, what can be harmful about that space, even though our intent is not to harm, what can be harmful about that space is it can start to, carry shame along with being in a negative space. So all emotions are valuable. What do you think about that sentence?
I went off on a little tangent.
Okay.
And I think if it's okay, I think I want to go with
Go ahead.
it. Because it just occurred to me when you're talking about how does this get really toxic, what happens when you're talking with somebody who really doesn't feel good? They're struggling with their self-esteem. They've just had a very poor parenting interaction and they feel like a terrible parent or whatever it might be. Let's just summarize it and say, I'm feeling like a terrible person today. And then I come in and I sit down with you and you're like, oh, well, you're so wonderful. Well, you do great with parenting. Look at the success your kids have had. And, you're a great husband and you seem to be such a wonderful person to work for. And I just that uplifting, like, and I'm like, no, you didn't hear me.
Right.
You just totally blew right through me and disavowed what it is that I'm really experiencing. And it occurred to me that is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a lot of what I'm talking about is that when a person does that, even unintentionally, it can kind of devalue the full range of the emotional experience, that human emotional experience. You're clearly in a moment there because something has happened.
Right.
And a lot of times what happens, even on a neurological level, is my neurons, right? Like my mirror neurons are wanting to help you. Like I want to save you.
Right.
And the way that my personality structure is to save you is to be like, you've got this.
Yeah. You can do this.
And it's very natural to do that.
It is.
It feels uncomfortable sometimes to sit with a person who needs to sit with their emotions.
Like nails on a chalkboard.
Right. And so I think that's what we often do is to try to escape that uncomfortability of the situation. Right? To like, I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to throw out a couple of quotes or repost something on my wall or, send like hugs and love and a few emojis to you via text, right?
It's funny, Kasie. I think that in my supervision of younger therapists and stuff, they really have to get comfortable when the other person is uncomfortable, even like just sitting with somebody that's bawling.
Yeah.
Like the natural tendency is like, oh, well, let's repair. Let's fix this. Let's refocus this. Let's get a better focus point. Let's reframe this life situation so that you won't cry all day.
Right.
That might be well timed at some times with different people, but it's also really important to just be there.
Right. And later on, we can challenge some of that stuff. But
Right.
in the initial phases, sometimes we just need to be. And that's what happens sometimes with things when it gets toxically positive. Ooh, that was a hard phrase to say. Toxically positive.
Came out well.
Yeah, thank you. Because it also can cause feelings of guilt and shame on the part of the person that basically, if I'm feeling a negative emotion, it's kind of unacceptable in this space to have a negative emotion. And I see this sometimes even with couples or like starting relationships where it's like, I don't have the space even in my own home to experience a bad day because I'm bringing people down. And that gets into a very tough space. So it's hard. I think it's hard. And then I think also what it can create is it can create a sense of avoidance. So on the individual's level, perhaps I start to go into some avoidance cycles to try and circumnavigate those feelings or emotions that are negative to try to recreate like positive thoughts and all of that stuff and keep going until I completely lose my mind on somebody for a very benign reason because I've avoided feeling all the negative emotions.
You know what's buzzed in my brain?
Go for it.
Listening to you is like, how do you think this mixes with codependence?
Oh,
Right.
all up in it.
Wow. Right. Like for the listening audience, I found a way to kind of synthesize codependence is basically you generally become the emotion of the other person. So when they're well, you're well. When they're not well, you're not well. So your behavior is designed around trying to make them be well so that ultimately you'll be well. And that, I mean, we all really get codependent with our children. It's a big part of parenting.
Absolutely.
It's tough to watch your kids struggle. But it just occurred to me, I mean, yeah, how does this work with codependence?
Yeah. And so my answer to that too, not answer, but my response to that is kind of the next point, which is if we do not experience the negative emotions, then we deny ourselves the ability to face challenging emotions and develop deeper insights.
Wow. Want to say that again?
Yeah. So if we do not experience negative emotions, we deny ourselves the ability to face challenging emotional situations or emotions and develop deeper insight.
It's all about emotional growth.
Mm-hmm.
No pain, no gain, as they say.
Right.
You know, we have to walk through, what is it? To walk through the valley of death.
Through the shadow of the valley of
through
death.
the shadow of the valley of death. It's scary stuff to do, but you know, part of what I'm all about too is really encouraging people. Like, you know, we can deal with those tough times.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in a tough life stage, people try to skitter out of there pretty quickly.
Right.
I mean, they don't like staying in an uncomfortable space, and that's where impulsivity can be generated.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the confidence that, yeah, we can do this. And the result is emotional growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the best examples of that I love to point people to is, you know, if you've ever been walking down the sidewalk, right? And if you ever think about the heaviness of concrete, like how much would you say like a cut out portion of concrete would weigh just in general?
Oh, man, it's heavy.
It's super heavy,
Yeah.
right? And sunlight is not penetrating concrete.
No.
Right? Like you cover up something, it's covered, right?
Right.
Isn't it amazing that through some weathering and things like that, you start walking down the sidewalk, there's no vegetation, and all of a sudden you see a weed or dandelion just
How do they get
poking
there?
through the concrete.
Right.
Right. To
Right.
me, that is the quintessential definition of resiliency. And I'll
That's
tell you why.
cool. I love metaphors.
Because, you know, photosynthesis is the way that plants make food and stuff. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Miss Grigla from Bandy's High School, if you're listening. Photosynthesis. And so you would think without that sunlight, without the water, that those things would not be able to continue on to bounce back, to be resistant, and to exist. But the root system, how it's nurtured, it continues. And when it continues and it comes through the concrete and pushes up through that, thinking about how strong, after experiencing a period of total darkness, that weed has become.
Right.
And it might be annoying to other people, but it poked through, right?
Yeah.
Quintessential definition of resiliency. And so I think about that and I talk about that in my office a lot. Like it's really about the bounce back where a lot of this lives. Like you experience the emotion and you're able to really experience that post-traumatic growth or that post-growth from those negative emotions. And even thinking through my kids' favorite movies, Inside Out is one of my kids' favorite movies. And
That
it's
is a great show.
Yeah, it's great. And so what we learn in the end, spoiler alert, is that sadness is essential to experiencing happiness on the other side. So
Right.
experiencing some defeat to be able to appreciate and experience the level of joy and happiness on the other side is essential.
You don't win if
Yeah.
you don't lose.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it that I heard one time? And this sounds like toxic positivity, but I promise it's in good faith, right?
Okay.
Which is, you know, winners are just losers that tried again.
Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. I don't think that's very toxic, but winners are just losers that tried again.
Over and over again.
Over and over again. Fall down 7, get up 8, right? So what are some signs that toxic positivity is kind of infiltrating your life? Well, one sign would be if you find yourself trying to brush off your problems. That's kind of that avoidance cycle. I'm just going to brush them off, face the day. You know, I can't let anybody at work know that I'm not in a good space. I call it church face a lot, where it's like,
You're talking about almost toxic positivity with yourself.
oh yeah, this is
right?
internal. Sorry.
Internal,
Yeah.
yeah.
Internal toxic
Yeah.
positivity, where it has gotten to you where you're like, okay, no negative emotions here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good. And
Never
so,
let them see you sweat.
right. And so it's church face, right? Like I've yelled in my car at my kids for 15 minutes. We get to church and I'm like, hey everybody, praise the Lord, things like that. It's my church face. And so there is that brushing off of stress. I'm good. How are you doing? I'm good.
So
good.
problem avoidance, emotion avoidance,
Yeah.
internalization, which are things that just,
Yeah. For myself, if I know this is infiltrating myself, I'm loading up on caffeine. Like, I'm just going to shake it out, right? Like, just going to give myself a caffeine buzz real quick. We might self-medicate in those moments. There's a lot of things that can come along with that kind of avoidance of like, oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. And it's okay to be good, but sometimes it's okay not to be okay as well.
As long as it's genuine.
As long as
kind
it's
of
genuine.
kind of going back to that,
Yeah.
if you're having good days and you're positive most of the time, I would stand by that. I don't
Yeah.
think there's anything wrong with that.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
As long as it's a genuineness that comes about you.
Yeah. I think also if you start having these immense feelings of guilt and shame around your real emotions, so you're genuinely experiencing sadness, you're genuinely experiencing anger or feelings of disappointment and those harder, bigger emotions, and then you start like feeling guilty about it, thinking things like, well, I know that somebody always has it harder than me, like I shouldn't feel this way. I call it shoulding yourself. Giggle, because it sounds like something else. But when you should yourself, it often can get to this place of having some really distorted thoughts about like, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be happy. I have a good life. I have a good house. And all of those things can be true.
It's funny. I don't know why my book is coming up so much today, because I have a chapter in there. Insecurities will twist your mind into negative thinking. I mean, that's what you're talking about there.
Well, if you haven't noticed, I have read your book.
Oh my gosh, that's true.
Yeah, I even can name specific chapters from it, as we noticed yesterday.
I did. We were talking about the class thing, and I was impressed. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Well, that means you make a lot of sense, friend. You make a lot
Well,
of sense.
Thank you.
Look at that compliment.
Yahoo!
But I think when that happens and we start having those feelings of guilt and shame, two things can happen at the same time. You can appreciate things in your life and still have hard negative emotions at the same time. Those are not mutually exclusive things. You can appreciate your family. You can love your husband or wife. You can love your children. You can love your job and still have feelings of sadness, disappointment, grief, loss, and be hurting.
Let's park out here for a minute.
Go for it.
I literally just had this in a therapy session a few days ago, and we were really, really talking about, can you have multiple angles at a thing at the same time? Like, I'm terribly in love with you, and I'm angry with you right now. When I'm expressing something that I'm angry about, it doesn't mean this love for you just went away. If I'm really frustrated at my job today because the supervisor just went off on a tangent and totally blew off my project, but I still feel like this company is growing and it's a great spot for me and I thrive here. I don't know why we tend to just crush our experience for this toxicity that you're talking about with us today. You're teaching us about it's okay to be genuinely in the moment with multiple things. I mean, look, do you know how many emotions we experience in the course of a day? Could you think we can count them? It's constantly moving. Yeah. It's constantly changing. I feel way better now than I did when I started the show and a little bit ago talked about it, because I enjoy talking about these topics and presenting these shows. Yeah, thank you. Because it's just you're engaged and like you're constantly changing. And so, I just wanted to park out there because I think that's a really crucial point that people can understand. I can be happy and sad in the same moment. Look, even furthermore, when you're grieving, I like to tell people, You know what grieving is? It's an entire array of the emotional spectrum at a time when you've made a major loss has happened in your life. And I mean, you see people that are laughing their ass off over there in the corner, and then the next minute they're a puddle crying on the floor because of the variance
Yeah.
that happens, especially, I think, in times of grieving.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, one of my biggest heroes is my cousin Wesley, if you're listening, Wesley. He went through an experience with his family 8 days after his son was born, like had a heart defect, genital heart defect, and ended up getting a full-on heart transplant at 10 months old.
Holy cow.
His little boy. Life expectancy was pretty limited, lived to the age of 6, and then his son passed away.
Oh,
and
gosh.
my cousin, with all the humility and love in his heart, gave the eulogy of his son. So you cannot begin to tell me that two things can't happen at the same time.
That's
where you're
1,000 emotions in one
right,
moment.
complete and utter grief, but able to celebrate how this child's life brought a whole community together.
Yeah.
And that's what it did. I mean, it brought a whole community. And now I could go on and on about the foundation that they've started, where they actually have purchased a house in Durham, North Carolina, for people staying that have immune-compromised children that can't stay in hotel rooms. And so they can stay there for free. Families can stay there for free.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Hearts and Hope Foundation, check it out. So,
Hearts and Hopes Foundation.
Yeah.
All right.
But,
You're taking me back to when I spoke at my sister's funeral, and we
Yeah.
did a show that was pretty genuine at the end of that. By the way, I'm much better now, but if you go back and listen to that show, I forget what it was called. I think it was Chris's personal experience with, I don't know, we make dying complicated and grieving. I think that's what the title was. Anyway, towards the end of it, we played Country Roads, and I was checked out, man. I couldn't. I was checked out.
Have you seen my Country Roads graphic tee?
No.
It's the best.
Oh,
Anyway.
Friday, you might have to wear it tomorrow in
Oh, maybe I
celebration of WVU football day Saturday.
That's right.
Beating playing Virginia Tech. Sorry.
Yeah. So what else are some things that we do? Hiding our true feelings behind quotes on our social medias or on our whiteboards at our office, or behaviors that are seemingly more acceptable. So we're kind of hiding or disguising ourselves, disguising how we really feel. This is one thing that I think people often fall into the trap of, is that when I am disguising my negative feelings, I start minimizing others people's feelings because I feel uncomfortable and I feel exposed.
Just try to avoiding vulnerability
Yeah.
and getting out of the moment. And
Yeah, or like if you start sharing too much about yourself, I'm going to be in that space with you, and I don't want to tell you about my stuff. So
right.
it gets uncomfortable real quick. Or the opposite is true. So other people around you are being really positive. So when you're in this negative space, you start shaming other people for being positive.
Oh, that probably happened. I can see that in a lot of the client sessions that I've worked with people on.
What are you so happy about?
Right.
Whew.
It can be pretty cutting, slicing.
Yeah. And then
But that's a little bit more obvious.
It
I
is more
feel like.
obvious.
Yeah, as far as the sarcasm is another one that's a little bit more obvious. So some of these are obvious, but some of these are really insidious.
Yeah, it can be very subtle.
Yeah.
And then trying to be stoic or get over it, that is what it is attitude. I did some challenge work in a session the other day about, and I have
challenge work.
I do.
That's a great way to
have
put
a
it.
long-standing, I want to throw this out there as a caveat, I have a long-standing professional relationship with this person.
Yeah.
And I said, it is what it is as a cop-out in this situation.
Oh, yeah.
And so we kind of challenged that thought a little bit, because what you're really saying is this instead of it is what it is, because that insinuates you don't care, and nothing you have said in here
Ever
insinuates that you don't care.
You didn't care. Yeah, nice call out.
Yeah. And so what are some alternative statements? So we talked a little bit about some toxically positive statements, right? Like just stay positive, good vibes only. It could be worse. Things happen for a reason. Failure isn't an option. Of course it's an option. Look at my kid's English grade.
Wow. Yeah.
Happiness is a choice. Some really good statements, I think, that we can kind of start to incorporate are actually quite simplistic, but very effective. I'm here for you no matter what. That can be a open-ended, like, I'm here for you if you need me. I'm here if you want to talk. To kind of open that door. I'm listening and actually listen. Don't say I'm listening and then start doing other things, but I'm listening can be a good opener into that. That, like exactly what Lisa said, that must be really hard. And leaving it, not over talking it, just that must be really hard. And being in the moment. Sometimes bad things really do happen. How do you think I can help you? Which is kind of an empathetic opener to how I want to help, but I'm acknowledging that bad things have happened. And failure is a part of life. Your feelings about this are very valid.
Okay, let me talk to all the people pleasers out there. Any people pleasers listening to this show, listen up. Speaking of myself, by the way, because we all have a certain amount of people pleasing that kind of goes into us. Look, okay, I want to restart this little section.
Okay, go ahead.
Right? No, I'm going to ask you to restart this little
Okay.
section. I guess I can read them and look at them
It's
as well.
okay.
I want to highlight for people that have any kind of people pleasing in them, that have any kind of codependence with your children as parents, that we really do. There's a lot here in these statements.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to suppose to you that these are kind of unnatural statements.
Yeah.
This is not going to come naturally to you when you try to do this with your spouse, or even when a friend is bummed out. Like, I just want to set up the difficulty and the importance of trying to figure out how are we avoiding. I don't even think we're avoiding toxic positivity with these. I think that we're learning a different way. Like, you're teaching us a different way that's going to be very unnatural for a little while at how to interact with somebody when they're struggling. Whether it be your kid, your spouse, your cousin, your uncle, your neighbor, whomever. We have people pleasing. And I know we touched on this a little bit ago.
Yeah.
But this is really unnatural and hard to execute.
Yeah, this is not easy. This is not easy to
I would
implement.
much rather feel natural providing a comfort statement or a support statement or an encouragement statement.
Yeah. Also, like, I'm a doer by nature, right?
Right.
Like, and I'm a
That's
fixer.
the whole nother component.
Yeah, I'm a fixer and a doer. Like, oh, you got a problem? Let me fix it.
Right.
And that I can fall into these traps, right? Like, instead of saying like, oh, here's what you do, it's like, I'm listening.
Yeah. And if you're following the show, you've heard us talk about abandonment and engulfment on the show a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Half of us are abandonment people and half of us are engulfment people. And when you go through this process, the fix-it people are abandonment people.
Correct.
We're action-oriented.
I'm pointing at myself.
Right? As well.
Yeah.
And so these, just listen up. Start this over again.
Okay.
I would ask you, just listen up to some of these statements and just let them sit in with you. How could you really see yourself doing this? Because this is not fixing anything.
No.
This is not even taking an action on anything. This is just applying what we've been talking about here today and understand the unnatural difficulty sometimes in these statements.
Yeah. I also want to point out too, Chris, that before I go back into that list, that, not that we're like having a moment, but when I was saying these statements, I was making eye contact with you, and I think that makes a difference too, because
nonverbals are huge.
Yeah, because we're locking in. And so when we're saying things like this, the genuinely, like, the feelings behind that, the genuine feelings behind it also come along with being able to be present. And that includes eye contact, proximity, things like that as well. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So, like, if I said this to you across the room, it wouldn't mean as much, right? So the alternative statements instead of toxic statements: I'm listening. I'm here no matter what. Whatever it is that you need. That must be really hard. And then just leaving it there.
How do you just leave it there?
That must be really hard.
Right.
Sometimes bad things happen. How can I help you right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Failure is a part of life. Your feelings are very valid.
Right.
Yeah. And I can tell you another one that I think can go a long way, especially for all the parents out there. I'm sorry.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, twofolds. I think that when our kids have over emotional experiences, sometimes we feel like they're being dramatic, which they are, but
Sometimes.
but their feelings are valid. And I think when a parent steps down off of that, like I'm the parent pedestal, and comes down and says, I'm sorry. And even with my youngest one saying, do you need a hug?
Yeah.
And it's not me being disingenuous with her. It's really that reinforcing of your emotions are valid. This is a sad time. Even with my spouse too, like noticing that physical touch can be important in that moment.
You know, we talk about parenting on this show, and I have it as a part of the trifecta. Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University, I think that works the bomb.
Love it.
Gottman's stuff with emotion-focused therapy,
Love it.
abandonment, and engulfment, I think it's the bomb. And the third one is Love and Logic, right?
In parenting, yeah.
And parenting. And part of the reason why I like that is because of this. I mean, they will tell you it's a revolutionizing mentality to change the way that you're connecting with your children, and it's based on compassion for their real emotion, what they're really experiencing, and then you do come in and offer encouragement on the other side of that, but the compassion comes first. And you know, it strikes me that as these statements are there, like, you know, that must be a really tough time for you. It's not a sarcastic down talk when you're making eye contact, like you said, and you're really there, like, I would like to have your back. I want to be there with you on this.
Yeah.
Not even for you. It's a tricky word, but with you.
Yeah.
This is unnatural, y'all.
Right. Because you can be with someone and not necessarily be there for them because of their actions. And I think even going back to the kid example, sometimes our kids do things that
heinous,
like that are just like
frustrating.
They're frustrating. We wouldn't support what they did. They're making bonehead decisions, right? Like just
Good
being
word.
like the frontal lobe is not fully developed, right? So it's
however,
however, you can be with them even if you're not for the actions that they took. You can be with them emotionally. You can be with them as a solid, supportive adult that understands that they're going through a difficult time.
You know, a kid, as an example, in the conference that I went to with Love and Logic, when I got turned on to it, came back with a tough grade, and I think they just failed a test or something, just got blew up, and it was rough, and they're just getting ready, and they come home and they're ready for the lecture and ready to just get slammed, and and they're just just losing it. And when he explained what the parent wants to try to do in this situation, kid didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Because all the parents said was like, wow, that must really be, that's a tough thing to go through. You must be having a hard time with that. That was it.
Yeah.
It's like, kid's like, well, yeah, I am, but I thought you were going to be mad at me.
Right.
Right. And maybe you are. But giving honor to that person to just be where they are.
Yeah.
I love where you're going with this.
Yeah, I often ask my son a lot. My daughter, she does her own thing, but my son, I often will say, like, can you give me some sentences about what was going on with that, so that they can kind of explain where they were. Like, I didn't try, or I didn't study, or just give me some sentences about that. And I really think it validates in the moment kind of like what they're experiencing. Instead of coming home, they're already frustrated at themselves, and now I'm frustrating them anymore, and then they yell, and then I send them to their room or take away bedtime. Or
And feeling convicted.
yeah, looking at you.
Because that's what we do.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you, listening, again, if you think we got this, I'm not speaking for yourself, I'll just speak for myself.
No.
I do not do these things well all the time.
Oh, preach.
Most of the time, I'm
Me either.
probably not.
Yeah.
But this is a really good section.
Yeah. So what are kind of some solutions that we can talk about. When we first started this show, I kind of promised some solution-focused things to be able to kind of add in here towards the end. And so these are kind of some of the takeaway points that I have, and I'll be curious to see if you have others. Solution 1, manage negative emotion, but do not deny them. So that goes back to that point of, we need to experience the full range to be able to have that growth element, right? So we want to be able to manage our negative emotions, but avoiding them or denying them is not the way to do that.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Be realistic about your feelings. If you're mad, you're mad. Agreed?
Absolutely.
Okay. You can feel more than one thing at a time. We've talked about that 2 things can be true, and you can have a positive emotion and a negative emotion at the same time. Feeling appreciative, but also feeling, sad or discouraged at the same time. Focus on listening to others and being present. Probably the hardest concept of the day. And then this is one of my favorites. I often in my office talk a lot about tracking, which is another resiliency-based type of term, but body scanning, whatever you want to call it, mindfulness. But notice how you feel. And I think the important distinction in that is, I don't know if you've ever seen a lot of like biofeedback images of when people are feeling certain emotions, but pride, happiness, lust, love, anger, all light up in the same area of the chest and the brain.
Oh, wow. No, I have not, to answer your question.
Noticing and connecting to how you're feeling, I think, is an important part of this, as well as being able to get into that genuine experience, but to also know how to manage yourself at that point.
Yeah, it's funny because I did some Gestalt training, therapy training, and I don't use it a lot.
Yeah.
And the here and now methodologies, a lot of people talk about mindfulness nowadays. That's where a lot of that comes from, is those here and now models of interacting and working with people.
Like line of hands DBT and stuff.
Yeah, well, because people just don't know what to do with it. Like one of the criticisms I think of therapy is, well, they just listened. They didn't say anything. So it's tough to get in there, but what I hear you talking about with these solutions is the themes that we've been talking about, just being present, being available, being consistent. Those are some of the things that come to my mind. I think I would add to the list of being genuine.
Yeah.
Being true and genuine with somebody is absolutely a big. I mean, we've talked about it all night tonight.
Yeah.
As a part of interacting. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about. That I think it almost centers around a lot of them.
It does. And I think when we're authentic and you allow yourself to feel the emotions that you're experiencing, then what you're putting out there is a person who is their best selves, right? So one of my favorite things to kind of talk about is this quote by Victor. Oh, what's his last name? I'm going to quote it in just a moment. But it says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go and do that, because what the world needs are people who have come alive.
Say that again?
So don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go and do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
Is that Howard
Thurman? Yeah.
Howard Thurman.
Howard Thurman. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Chris. Howard Thurman said that.
That's cool.
And I think that is something that's really true. People, and probably yourself included, for all those who are listening and have downloaded us and subscribed and rated us with a 5.
There you go.
Yeah. But
that's funny.
But the truth is that I feel, and I don't think there would be people that disagree, I feel that the best people I have around me are the people who are the realest and the most genuine people that show me their authentic self and take me at my authentic self. Mm-hmm. Even on a personal note, to kind of wrap up my part of this before you take us out, Chris, is that, my whole life I've been told a lot of times, like, you're a lot. And I am. I'm not in denial, right? Like Neil over here went to high school with me. I'm not in denial that I can be a lot.
Right.
But the people who are in my life and in my life on a personal level think I'm enough. And I want to make that distinction that to some people I'm a lot, but the people that I really choose to be around think that I'm enough.
Yeah.
And they take me at my genuine self and I take them right back. And some of my friends are so different than I am as a person, but they are the best friends of my life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I like what you've done with this in presenting it to us to help us to think about I'm going to say again, I think a dramatically different way of interacting than people typically do. I'm kind of struck like I was a little bit with the Love and Logic conference that I was at in totally putting upside down the way that we typically interact. We're so fast paced, we're so positive and so action oriented and being productive, and we don't tend to slow down and just be with as much anymore. And I think, you know what, I don't even want to say as much anymore because the human emotional experience, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of barriers to trying to execute these solutions because you care and you're compassionate towards somebody and you want to lift them up and help and encourage and all of that. And so this is, good timing is probably needed because you don't want to do this all the time. I heard you say earlier, by the way, later on you confront and in the next step you might offer an encouragement or a suggestion and this type of thing, because true friends tell you what's true, right?
Right.
I like that phrase.
Yeah.
But that's, so this is turning upside down, I think, a lot of the ways that we try to operate when someone brings something to us. So I'm appreciative of you bringing it. It's I could see why you found this topic and kind of fell in love with it years ago.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yes, years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. And it's clearly been a big part of your therapy work with people.
It has been. And I would tell you the year, but that would date me because it was back in grad school. So.
Oh, come on. I got you beat. I got you beat by far.
By a decade.
All right.
All right.
Any idea where we're going next? Do you know? Because we have one more week, unless a pop guest pops up, which I don't think is going to happen. We got you for one more week. Any ideas?
Not yet.
All right. That's
It'll be a surprise.
All right.
Keep the mystery alive.
Well, listen, be with each other, help each other, but just be with each other, I think, is a nice way to end the show and kind of being able to kind of encourage, but you got to be with somebody before you encourage them, right?
That's right.
So y'all have a great week, and we're going to be looking for you next time. Take care.
Bye.